Let's begin with Texas hosting Kansas State, noon Eastern time. Massive, massive game in the Big 12, where, of course, we have found ourselves in a spot where all these teams have one conference loss. So it's everyone's favorite Elimination Saturday. So Kansas State has lived several lives over the last maybe 6 weeks or so. They seemingly were falling apart. They were having injury issues. And then as they face some of the softer teams on their schedule, they haven't just been beating them. They've been absolutely blowing them out of the water. Texas is a 4-point home favorite. Of course, we still don't have Quinn Ewers in this matchup. Do you think, Danny, that Kansas State is going to be able to take advantage of this opportunity to be able to get back into that Big 12 title game picture as they are the reigning champions of the conference?
I absolutely think they could. We'll give our locks tomorrow. There's a couple things that I think are really interesting in this matchup because Malik Murphy wasn't great. I think he played like you expected to. He didn't make the catastrophic mistake, but he made some mistakes, right? One of his, the one pick, he was trying to get rid of it in the pressure and totally just forgot oh yeah, it's what it's like to get hit and how quick the guys are as he's trying to throw it away or get it to his outlet. And it was underthrown and picked to go the other way, but good for him. The other quarterback, Keaton Slovis, also had a bad game, and you had a lot of points of special teams. You had a lot of assistance where there was a pretty wide margin for error against BYU. That's going to tighten up some. A mistake like he made against BYU could possibly hurt them. What I think is interesting with Kansas State, their secondary is not great. They can be had in the deep passing game. And that's where I'm wondering, will Sark dial those plays up to A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy on the outside? Will they take their shots, and will Malik Murphy connect on them and take advantage of what I think is probably the best way for them, to score points on this Kansas State defense? Because Kansas State, pretty physical team. I know Jonathan Brooks has been great, but if they can slow down the run, can they put it on Malik Murphy, who is probably even – now, I didn't think he was mobile. I didn't think by any means they were going to start running RPOs. He is a pocket passer, but he also didn't run very much at all. He is pretty much strictly in the pocket. I'm just curious to see if Kansas State can make them one-dimensional and put it on his back. And if they do, he's going to have to step up and make some big-time throws.
I think Kansas State coach Chris Kleiman was pretty revealing in his presser this week. He talked about how he wished he had a little more film on Malik Murphy. And I think that is just obviously true. They only have one game of him, but also the fact that Texas showed basically nothing, right? Mm-hmm. We know this kid's a really good athlete. We know he can run. I think Texas realizes that BYU's personnel is just, they don't have P5 players. It's a G5 looking football team. And you actually just watch him on the field. Texas didn't have to show anything really. And they covered the game comfortably. So if you're K-State, you're kind of flying blind. But what you do know is that Texas has done a great job creating wide open guys against you 2 years in a row by using formation, especially last year. K-State did not adjust to the unbalanced stuff. They really struggled with the trips into the boundary stuff. Now, I know Texas had different personnel last year and they had Bijan and that kind of thing, but I think Sark's going to be in his bag here, and I'm relatively confident that Texas can score 30 just with Murphy and dialing up different stuff. Because I agree with you. I don't think this Kansas State pass defense is worth a damn. Kansas State very well could have lost to TCU had Morton not got knocked, or to Texas Tech rather, had Morton not got knocked out and they had to play the third stringer who, just as we saw last week against BYU, really can't play. So I think Texas will score. The question is just how much better is this K-State offense, and can Texas defense get back to what it was, more against Alabama?
And if Texas is scoring, where is it scoring from? Because I do think that they will. I think you can get big plays against this Kansas State secondary, but we've seen Texas get these big plays with Quinn Ewers, and part of the not having the tape on Malik Murphy is for Kansas State not 100% sure what Texas is going to do. And for the rest of us, it's not exactly being 100% sure what Texas can do with Malik Murphy. Can he hit those shot plays the way that Quinn Ewers does? Probably. He's a pretty talented player, but it's yet to be seen. And I think that it's important because if you look at the red zone, and I've talked about this with Texas before, they're awful in the red zone, just completely poopy. They are 114th nationally in points per red zone possession at 3.82. Kansas State defensively is 6th in points allowed per red zone possession at 3.3. And on the other side, offensively, Kansas is 3rd in the nation at 5.25 points per, whereas Texas is 2nd at 2.74. So I think the red zone is going to play a very key spot in this one. And will Texas's offense actually be better with Murphy in there than it is with Ewers? Because, like you were saying, Danny, even though we didn't see it, maybe you can use Murphy more as a threat with his legs in that spot, along with him and Jonathan Brooks, to kind of open things up and find some lanes to be able to, push the ball home and finish it. And then Kansas State on offense, can they score enough to keep up? Because I do think Texas is going to put points on the board. And this Kansas State offense, like you look at the offensive line, I think they're good at tackle with Cooper Beebe and KT Leviston. I think they're both good players, but they're kind of soft on the interior. And that's not great considering you're going up against Tavondre Sweat, Alfred Collins, Byron Murphy, and everybody that Texas has on its defensive line who have been, really good on the interior of that defensive line. And I think that is going to be a problem for a Kansas State team that, frankly, is going to want to run the ball, is going to want to limit the possessions in this game and slow things down to keep that Texas offense off the field and keep this in an area where they can, keep close and give themselves a chance to win. Are they going to be able to do that against this Texas defense? I'm not entirely confident that they will.
Especially because of the way they attack, right? Like Texas defense is, to me, more vulnerable to the pass than they are the run. They're fairly stout in the front 7. So can K-State pass enough to beat Texas? They might be able to. Guys, like the line's like what, 5?
4.
So 4. I mean, yeah, like that. You give Texas 3 for home. Vegas essentially sees these teams without Quinn Ewers as like Texas 1 point better on a neutral field. I do think the chance that we have a 2-loss Big 12 champion is a lot higher than people are discussing out there.
That's true. I would agree. I mean, obviously, Texas could lose this game.
Yes. And Oklahoma State, well, we'll get to it. But
do you think the X factor could be Avery Johnson, who's been playing a lot more since Will Howard? They've been using him as their running quarterback. And to me, it's interesting because they've almost gone to this 2-quarterback system using him. And I think they worked it last year with Adrian Martinez and Will Howard. And I think Will Howard's an okay runner, but going back to Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator, like he was a running quarterback who really liked to run, as himself as a player. I think you might see Avery Johnson get some carries in this game. And he's a pretty dynamic runner. That's what makes things pretty interesting. And they've worked a 2-quarterback system. So maybe they try to continue that. In Austin.
Is Kansas State computer trickers, or are they just really good at all the fine details? Because you look at the personnel, who is overwhelming on this Kansas State team, but yet everything on a down-to-down basis, everything in terms of your success rate, like all the things that factor into power ratings give Kansas State a good enough power rating so that you are basically right in line or on the same path as Texas, as you mentioned. Because there hasn't been one result that I pointed to all season. I've been like, man, that team, like they are ready to go into Austin and kick Texas's ass. But is that just, part of the Chris Kleiman experience with Kansas State where you're able to take personnel that is not overwhelming and be able to figure it out on a down-to-down basis to close that gap with teams that are more talented like Texas? Because I don't think Texas is good at the small things. I think Kansas State is great at the small things. And I think that Texas has the erasers and the hammers that can be ultimately the difference in a very close game, where if Kansas State gets put in that position, I don't know what the move is, what the finishing move that the Wildcats can pull out is. But then I'm also looking at the coaching matchup. Who would you rather trust, Chris Kleiman or Sark? Because there's a good X's and O's argument, but also there are a lot of Texas fans and USC fans and Washington fans that might also say, this is going to be a tough spot for Steve Sarkisian, and definitely, how about this? Can't lose for Steve Sarkisian. Can't lose game. You can't have this squad go into Tuscaloosa, beat Alabama, and then enter Week 11 with 2 losses.
You'd rather have Chris Kleiman. Chris
Right.
Kleiman is a much better head coach than Steve Sarkisian so far in his tenure. On game day, would I rather have Sark or Kleiman to run a big-time program? I've seen Sark recruit, and that we assume that guys can recruit, but look at Dan Mullen. It doesn't always happen, right? So, but on a Saturday, I'd rather have Kleiman. For this specific matchup, I think Kansas State has to throw the ball well.
Mhm.
Texas's run defense is legitimately very good. Nobody has run the ball successfully on Texas all year because they are very stout at the point of attack. They have real NFL guys up front. So can they throw the ball well enough? Like Avery Johnson's been an awesome addition, and he can throw, by the way. Like he's not just a Wildcat quarterback. But my thought is they probably need Howard to play a really good game to win this one, or they need Murphy to self-destruct, and then you can win a game where you're scoring in the 20s. But if you need to get to 30-something, you probably need a really nice throwing game from Howard. I don't think Kansas State is computer triggers, right? I think Texas has played to its athleticism level once this year.
You would decidedly rather have Kleiman than Sark on a game day?
Yeah, I think his track record as a head coach from all the prior stops really matters to me. I think he's very trustworthy.
What about Sark's track record of calling plays on game day?
I think that's totally fair. Like, but it's also, I mean, how many times has that shown up this year? I think Sark's a pretty genius play caller. It did. Right, exactly.
No, I think that it's like last week they were very much not doing anything because, like we were saying, they were playing BYU. I think game day, I got nothing against Chris Kleiman, who I think is a great program leader, but I think during a game I would rather have Sark.